Emily sat in her cozy living room, surrounded by the warm glow of family photos and the soft crackle of the fireplace. She had always loved this house. It wasn't just a place to live, it was a sanctuary, a legacy passed down through her late husband's family. Every creak of the wooden floors and crack in the paint told a story. Though she and her husband James had built a comfortable life together, there was a sense of emptiness since his passing. Still, she found solace in her work and the memories they had created within these walls. One evening, as Emily prepared for bed, her phone buzzed unexpectedly. It was Liam, her stepson, calling late, a rare occurrence. She quickly answered, her heart skipping a beat. "Liam, is everything okay?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. On the other end, Liam's voice wavered, cracking under the weight of emotion. "Emily, I don't know what to do anymore," he began, his words heavy with exhaustion. He explained how Sophia, his wife, had been struggling with her pregnancy. She was irritable, overwhelmed, and most concerning to him, increasingly unhappy with her changing body. Her once vibrant demeanor had given way to bouts of hysteria, and her anger often spilled over onto Liam. "She screams at me for not understanding," Liam said, his voice trembling. "She's convinced I don't care, but I don't know how to help her. I think I'm failing her." Emily's heart ached for him. She could hear the strain in his voice, the desperation of a young man trying to navigate the overwhelming responsibilities of marriage and impending fatherhood. Despite everything, Liam had always been kind-hearted, the boy she had lovingly raised after his mother's passing. She felt a pang of guilt, wondering if she could have done more to prepare him for life's challenges. "Liam," she said gently, "you're not failing her. Pregnancy is hard, and so is marriage, but you're doing your best, and that matters." He let out a heavy sigh, the kind that carried months of pent-up frustration. "I don't know if I can do this alone," he admitted. Can we move in with you? Just for a while? Maybe being around family will help her." Emily hesitated. Her home had always been open to Liam, but this wasn't just about him. It was about Sophia, a woman she barely knew and who had always kept a polite but distant demeanor around her. Emily's instincts told her that this arrangement could bring complications, but how could she refuse? Liam sounded so broken, so in need of support. "I'll talk to your father," Emily said after a long pause. "We'll figure something out." Later that night, as she discussed Liam's request with James, doubts lingered in her mind. "Do you think this is a good idea?" she asked, sipping her tea as James sat across from her. He rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "Liam's our son," he said firmly, though Emily noted the slight hesitation in his tone. "If he needs us, we can't turn him away." Emily nodded, her love for Liam outweighing her apprehensions. The next morning, she called him back. "You can move in," she said, her voice steady despite the knots in her stomach. "Thank you," Liam replied, a mixture of relief and gratitude in his voice. "You don't know what this means to us." Within days, Liam and Sophia arrived with their belongings. Emily watched as they unloaded their car, her eyes lingering on Sophia, who stood apart from Liam, arms crossed and face pinched in displeasure. As they walked into the house, Sophia's first words caught Emily off guard. "This place is smaller than I thought," Sophia muttered, wrinkling her nose as she looked around. Emily forced a smile. "It's old, but it has character," she said, hoping to diffuse the tension. Sophia didn't reply, her expression unimpressed as she walked past Emily into the living room. Liam shot his stepmother an apologetic glance, but said nothing. Emily brushed off the comment, attributing it to nerves or exhaustion. But as the days turned into weeks, she began to notice small cracks in the arrangement. Sophia's polite facade quickly gave way to criticism, and Liam's once bright demeanor seemed dimmer each day. Still, Emily held on to hope. She had opened her home with love and compassion, believing that family could weather any storm together. Little did she know, the storm she had welcomed into her house would soon threaten to shatter her world. Chapter 2: The Unwelcome Guests. From the very first day Liam and Sophia moved in, Emily sensed a shift in the atmosphere of her home. Her once quiet sanctuary now felt heavy with unspoken tension, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Emily tried to push these feelings aside, reminding herself that this was family, her son and his wife, and that they needed her help. She was determined to make it work, even if it meant sacrificing her own peace. But Sophia's sharp tongue and constant complaints made it difficult. On their first morning in the house, Emily prepared a warm breakfast: eggs, pancakes, and freshly brewed coffee. She thought it would be a kind gesture to start their new arrangement on a positive note. When she set the plates on the table, Sophia barely glanced at them. "Is this whole wheat bread?" Sophia asked, poking at the toast with her fork. "No, it's just regular bread," Emily replied, trying to keep her tone light. Sophia sighed dramatically. "I can't eat this. It's too processed. Liam, didn't I tell you we need to stick to a healthier diet?" Liam shrugged, his eyes fixed on his phone. "It's fine, Soph. Just eat it." Sophia pushed the plate away, crossing her arms. "I'm not eating garbage," she muttered. Emily bit her lip to keep from snapping. Instead, she smiled tightly and said, "I'll make sure to buy whole wheat next time." But it wasn't just the food. Sophia seemed to find fault with everything: the creaking floors, the old wallpaper, even the way the sunlight filtered through the windows. "This house is so dark," she complained one afternoon, standing in the living room with her hands on her hips. "It's depressing. We should repaint or get new curtains or something." "It's a bit old-fashioned, but it's cozy," Emily said, trying to defend the home she had cherished for so many years. "Cozy?" Sophia scoffed. "It's like living in a museum." Liam, standing nearby, laughed lightly. "She's got a point, Emily. Maybe it's time for an upgrade." Emily's heart sank at his words. This was the house where Liam had grown up, the house she and her late husband had poured their love into. To hear him dismiss it so casually stung more than she cared to admit. Still, she tried to brush off the remarks. "They're just adjusting," she told herself. "Pregnancy can make people irritable." But as the days turned into weeks, Sophia's behavior only worsened. She stopped helping with chores entirely, claiming she was too tired or that it was unsafe for the baby. At first, Emily understood. She even offered to take on more of the workload, wanting to ensure Sophia felt comfortable. But it quickly became clear that Sophia wasn't just tired, she was entitled. "Emily," Sophia called from the couch one evening, her voice sharp. "Can you clean up the kitchen? There are crumbs everywhere, and that can't be good for the baby." Emily looked up from folding laundry, her hands full of Liam's shirts. "I was planning to clean up after I finished this," she said calmly. "Well, I'd appreciate it if you could do it now," Sophia snapped. "The baby comes first, you know." Liam walked into the room, catching the tail end of the conversation. "Mom, just do it. Sophia's right. We can't risk anything with the baby," he said, his tone dismissive. Emily stared at him, stunned. She had spent years raising Liam, teaching him to be kind and respectful, yet here he was, treating her like a maid. She wanted to protest, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she nodded and went to the kitchen, swallowing her frustration. Sophia's demands only grew bolder. She would call Emily into the room to fetch her water, snacks, or even the remote control, all while lounging on the couch. Emily began to feel like a stranger in her own home, tiptoeing around to avoid Sophia's constant criticisms. One afternoon, as Emily vacuumed the living room, Sophia let out an exaggerated groan. "Could you do that later? The noise is giving me a headache," she said, flipping through a magazine. Emily hesitated, her grip tightening on the vacuum handle. "I can finish quickly," she offered. "I said later," Sophia snapped, not even looking up. Emily turned off the vacuum and walked away, her hands trembling. She didn't know how much more she could take. Even Liam, once her sweet and loving stepson, had changed. He was no longer the boy who would sit with her in the kitchen, sharing his dreams and fears. Now he seemed distant, almost indifferent to her presence. When she tried to talk to him about Sophia's behavior, he brushed her off. "She's pregnant, Mom," he said one night when Emily brought it up. "Cut her some slack." "But Liam," Emily again, "she's treating me like—" "Just let it go," he interrupted, his tone sharp. Emily stood there in silence, watching the son she had loved and raised walk away without a second glance. She realized then that her home was no longer her sanctuary. It had become a battleground, and she was losing ground every day. As Emily climbed into bed that night, she stared at the ceiling, wondering how much longer she could endure this. She had welcomed them into her home with open arms, but now she felt like a prisoner. And deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. Chapter 3: A Heart Shattered. The day James died, Emily felt her world crumble. Her husband had been the rock of their family, a steady presence who balanced her kindness with his quiet strength. The sudden car accident that took his life left her reeling. Grief engulfed her, but she kept moving forward, planning the funeral and ensuring his memory was honored. She expected the support of her family during this dark time, especially from Liam and Sophia. What she received instead was indifference, followed by betrayal. On the day of the funeral, as Emily sat quietly in the front row of the small church, she couldn't help but notice the two empty seats meant for Liam and Sophia. At first, she thought they were simply running late, but as the ceremony began and the minister spoke of James's life, those seats remained unoccupied. Emily's heart ached, but she pushed the thought aside, telling herself there must have been a good reason. When she returned home that evening, exhausted and emotionally drained, she found Sophia lounging on the couch, flipping through her phone. The sight was jarring. Her casual demeanor was in stark contrast to the solemnity of the day. "You didn't come to the funeral," Emily said softly, her voice heavy with sorrow. Sophia glanced up, her expression indifferent. "I'm exhausted. Postpartum is no joke, she said, waving her hand dismissively. Emily blinked, stunned. "You couldn't spare an hour to say goodbye to James? He was your father-in-law." Sophia sighed, setting her phone down. "Honestly, Emily, he was barely around, always working. It's not like I knew him that well." The words hit Emily like a slap. Before she could respond, Liam walked in, holding their newborn son. "Mom, what's the big deal?" he said, shifting the baby in his arms. "Sophia's right. Dad was always busy. He was kind of distant." Emily stared at her stepson, the boy she had raised with love and patience, the boy who had once idolized his father. "How can you say that?" she asked, her voice breaking. "James worked hard to provide for this family. He loved you. He loved all of us." Liam shrugged, avoiding her gaze. "Look, I'm just saying what's true. Don't take it personally." Sophia smirked from her spot on the couch, clearly enjoying Emily's discomfort. "I mean, it's not like you're really his mom either," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. "You're just someone who stepped in." The room seemed to spin as Sophia's words hung in the air. Emily felt her knees weaken, the weight of grief and betrayal pressing down on her. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. After everything she had done for Liam, raising him as her own, loving him unconditionally, this was how he saw her? "Is that what you think, Liam?" Emily asked quietly, her voice trembling. Liam hesitated, glancing at Sophia. "I mean, you're not my real mom," he said finally, his tone almost apologetic. "I appreciate everything you've done, but—" "But what?" Emily interrupted, her voice rising. "But I'm not good enough, not real enough. I gave you everything I had, Liam. I loved you like my own son. And now you and your wife mock me in my own home?" Sophia rolled her eyes. "Oh, come on, Emily. Don't be so dramatic. We're just being honest." Emily couldn't hold back the tears any longer. She turned away, walking to the kitchen to compose herself. Her mind raced with memories. Liam as a little boy, clinging to her hand on his first day of school. Liam proudly showing her his report cards. Liam confiding in her about his hopes and dreams. All of it felt like a lie now, tarnished by his cold indifference. As Emily stood by the sink, staring out the window into the dark night, she realized something profound. She had lost not only her husband, but also the son she thought she knew. The love she had poured into this family felt like it had evaporated, leaving only an aching void in its place. From that moment, a wall began to build in Emily's heart. The betrayal cut so deeply that she knew things would never be the same. For the first time, she questioned whether she could endure the life she had been thrust into, a life where her sacrifices were met with scorn and her love was dismissed as insignificant. Chapter 4: New Beginnings, Old Wounds. Months had passed since Emily's confrontation with Liam and Sophia about James's funeral. Though the sting of their words hadn't faded, she tried to focus on her own healing. The house felt emptier without James, and though Liam and Sophia still lived there, their presence only deepened the void. They spoke to her only when they needed something, treating her less like family and more like an invisible fixture in the house. Emily counted down the days until they would move out, hoping to reclaim her peace. One morning, Sophia announced their big news at breakfast. "We've bought a plot in the city," she said, her voice brimming with excitement. "We're building a brand new house. No more living in this antique." Emily looked up from her coffee, surprised. She hadn't even known they were planning to move, let alone build a house. "That's wonderful," she said, though the words felt hollow. Sophia's eyes gleamed as she spoke about the modern design, the high-end finishes, and the prime location. "It's going to be perfect," she said. "Finally, a home that suits us." Liam chimed in, his tone smug. "Yeah, it's time for a fresh start. This old place just doesn't cut it anymore." Emily felt a pang of hurt but forced a smile. She knew they had always looked down on her home, but hearing them dismiss it so casually still stung. "I'm glad you're excited," she said softly. "When will it be ready?" Sophia grinned. "In a few months. And don't worry, Emily, we'll invite you to the housewarming party, maybe?" The months flew by, and soon the day of the housewarming arrived. Emily debated whether to go. She wanted to support Liam, despite everything, but a small voice in her head warned her that this might end in more heartbreak. In the end, she decided to go, if only to show that she still cared. She dressed in her best outfit, carefully selecting a thoughtful housewarming gift, a handmade wooden plaque with their family name engraved on it. When Emily arrived at the new house, she was struck by its beauty. The sleek lines, sprawling lawn, and large windows gleamed in the afternoon sun. It was a far cry from the warm, rustic charm of her own home, but she could see why they were proud of it. The driveway was crowded with cars, and the sound of laughter and chatter spilled out from the open doors. She walked toward the entrance, her gift in hand, but before she could step inside, Sophia appeared at the door. Her smile faltered when she saw Emily. "Oh, it's you," she said, her tone flat. "Hello, Sophia," Emily said, trying to stay cheerful. "I wanted to come celebrate with you and Liam." Sophia's eyes narrowed. "Well, we didn't really expect you to show up," she said with a smirk. "But if you want to come in, there's an entrance fee." Emily blinked, confused. "Entrance fee?" Sophia leaned against the doorframe, crossing her arms. "Yep, $1,300. If you want to come in, you have to pay. Otherwise, you can leave." The words hit Emily like a punch to the stomach. For a moment, she thought she had misheard. "Sophia, are you serious?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Sophia grinned, dead serious. Liam appeared behind her, his arm casually draped over her shoulder. "What's the problem, Mom?" he asked, feigning innocence. Emily stared at them both, her heart pounding. "You're asking me to pay to come into your house?" Sophia shrugged. "Well, you're not really family, are you? Just think of it as a donation." The words cut deeper than Emily thought possible. She stood frozen, her hand gripping the gift tightly. Memories of raising Liam, of the love she had poured into him, flashed through her mind. How could this be the same boy who once called her mom with such affection? Taking a deep breath, she steadied herself. "All right," she said, her voice calm but cold. "I'll go." Sophia smirked. "That's probably for the best." Emily turned and walked away, her heart heavy with pain. As she reached her car, she glanced back at the house. Laughter and music spilled out, the sound of a celebration she wasn't welcome to join. Sitting in the driver's seat, Emily realized something. This wasn't just about a housewarming or an insult. This was the moment she saw Liam and Sophia for who they truly were, and for the first time, she wondered if she could ever forgive them. Cutting the strings, reclaiming freedom and respect. The days following the housewarming party were a blur of emotions for Emily. She replayed the scene in her mind, the smug look on Sophia's face as she demanded $1,300 to enter their home, the casual indifference in Liam's eyes. It wasn't just the humiliation that hurt, it was the realization that the boy she had loved and raised no longer saw her as family. The betrayal burned deep. but it also ignited something else within her: resolve. Emily sat at her kitchen table, staring at her bank statements. For months, no, years, she had silently funded Liam and Sophia's lifestyle. Groceries, baby supplies, clothing, even the down payment for their new house. It had all come from her account. She had justified it to herself as part of being a mother, wanting to support Liam and his growing family. But now she saw the truth. She hadn't been supporting them. She had been enabling them. Her fingers tightened around her pen as she made her decision. Enough was enough. The next morning, Emily went to the bank. She spoke calmly to the teller, explaining that she wanted to transfer all the money from her shared account with Liam to a new private account. As she signed the paperwork, she felt a strange sense of liberation, as if she were reclaiming a part of herself that had been lost. 3 days later, the storm arrived. Liam and Sophia pulled up to Emily's house in a rush, their car screeching to a halt in the driveway. Emily watched them from the living room window, her heart pounding but her face composed. She opened the door just as they reached it, their expressions a mix of panic and fury. "What the hell is going on, Mom?" Liam demanded, his voice loud enough to make the neighbors peek out of their windows. "Why is the bank account empty?" Emily stepped outside, closing the door behind her. She didn't want them inside her sanctuary. Not anymore. Crossing her arms, she met Liam's gaze with a calmness that belied the turmoil inside her. "I moved the money to a different account," she said simply. Sophia's jaw dropped. "You did what?" she shrieked. "You heard me," Emily replied, her tone steady. "From now on, you'll have to pay for your own living expenses, your mortgage, your groceries, everything. I'm not funding your lifestyle anymore." Liam's face turned red with anger. "Are you serious? After everything we've been through, you're just cutting us off?" Emily's voice hardened. "Everything we've been through? Liam, I've given you everything. I opened my home to you. I took care of your wife and your child. I paid for your house. And what did I get in return? Disrespect, humiliation. Do you even understand what you did at that housewarming party?" Sophia rolled her eyes. "Oh, here we go. You're still mad about that? It was a joke." "A joke?" Emily snapped, her voice rising for the first time. "You called me a stranger, Sophia. You demanded money to let me into your house. That wasn't a joke. It was cruel." Sophia's smirk faltered, but she quickly recovered. "Well, you're overreacting." "No, I'm not," Emily said firmly. "I'm done letting you two walk all over me. If you want to live your lives the way you do, fine, but you'll do it without my help." Liam's voice cracked with desperation. "Mom, please, we need that money. How are we supposed to pay for everything?" Emily looked at him, her heart aching despite her anger. "That's not my problem anymore, Liam. You made your choices. Now you have to live with them." As she turned to go back inside, Sophia's voice cut through the air. "You'll regret this. You'll be begging us to forgive you when you're old and alone." Emily paused at the door, glancing over her shoulder. "I'd rather be alone than surrounded by people who don't respect me." With that, she closed the door, locking it behind her. For the first time in years, she felt free. Though her heart was heavy, she knew she had made the right choice. It was time for Liam and Sophia to stand on their own, and for Emily to reclaim her life. Chapter 6: Tables Turned. Days after Emily cut off Liam and Sophia financially, the atmosphere in her house changed. For the first time in years, it felt peaceful, like a storm had finally passed. She spent her evenings in quiet reflection, savoring the freedom of no longer catering to their endless demands. But she knew the reprieve wouldn't last long. People like Liam and Sophia didn't give up easily. Sure enough, it wasn't long before they returned. This time, they came bearing smiles and apologies, masks Emily recognized all too well. "Mom," Liam called as he stepped onto the porch, holding a bouquet of flowers. Sophia trailed behind him, wearing a strained smile. "We wanted to come by and make things right. Can we talk?" Emily opened the door cautiously, her expression unreadable. "What is it?" she asked, crossing her arms. Liam held out the flowers. "These are for you. To apologize for, the misunderstanding at the housewarming. We didn't mean to hurt you." Sophia chimed in, her voice syrupy sweet. "It's true, Emily. I've been thinking about how unfair we've been. You've done so much for us, and I feel terrible about how I acted. Emily raised an eyebrow, unimpressed by their performance. Is that so? Sophia nodded enthusiastically. Of course. I even told Liam that we need to start treating you with the respect you deserve. The words might have sounded sincere to anyone else, but Emily knew better. She saw through their act, the desperate attempt to manipulate her into giving them what they wanted. Still, she decided to play along for a moment, curious to see how far they would go. That's nice to hear, Emily said, her tone neutral. But why the sudden change of heart? Liam shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Sophia before replying. We've been under a lot of stress lately. The mortgage payments, the bills, it's been overwhelming. And, well, we realized how much we've relied on you. We don't want to lose you, Mom. Emily let the silence stretch, watching as they squirmed under her gaze. Finally, she spoke, her voice firm. You're right about one thing. You've relied on me far too much. And now that you've realized you can't keep living off my generosity, you've decided to pretend you care. But I'm not falling for it. Sophia's smile faltered. That's not true, Emily. We really do care. Do you? Emily countered, her eyes narrowing. Because caring doesn't look like demanding $1,300 to come to your housewarming. It doesn't look like treating me like a servant in my own home. And it certainly doesn't look like ignoring me until you need something. Liam's face flushed with anger. Mom, we're trying to apologize. What more do you want from us? I want you to leave, Emily said, her voice steady. Sophia's sweet demeanor cracked. Leave? After everything we've said? You're really going to throw us out like this? Emily stepped forward, her expression unwavering. Yes, because I've finally learned something. You don't want to apologize. You want my money, and I refuse to let you use me anymore. The couple's masks fell away entirely, replaced by fury. You think you're so much better than us? Sophia spat. You'll regret this, you old hag. Liam's voice joined hers, louder and angrier. Yeah, good luck being alone for the rest of your life. You'll die miserable, and no one will care. Emily stood her ground, her calm demeanor unshaken. That may be, she replied, but at least I'll die with my dignity intact. As they stormed off the porch, Emily felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Their anger no longer held power over her. For the first time in years, she had reclaimed her voice, her boundaries, and her peace. She watched them drive away, knowing they would return, but also knowing that she was ready for whatever came next. Chapter 7: A Bitter Fall. In the weeks following their explosive departure from Emily's porch, Liam and Sophia's lives began to unravel. At first, they kept up appearances, posting smiling photos on social media of their new house and extravagant outings. But behind the polished facade, their world was crumbling. The financial stability they had taken for granted was gone, and they were left to face the reality of their overspending and mounting debts. Without Emily's funds to support them, the cracks in their lifestyle became impossible to ignore. Mortgage payments began to pile up, and Sophia's penchant for high-end shopping only worsened their situation. She refused to cut back, convinced that appearances were everything. We can't look like we're struggling, she told Liam. What will people think? Liam, under immense pressure, struggled to keep up with her demands. He picked up extra shifts at work, but the money barely made a dent in their growing expenses. Credit card bills arrived faster than he could pay them, and late fees began to accumulate. Sophia, meanwhile, continued to live as if nothing had changed, hosting lavish dinner parties and buying designer clothes she couldn't afford. One evening, after another argument about money, Liam sat at the kitchen table, his head in his hands. We can't keep doing this, Sophia, he said, his voice weary. We're drowning. Sophia scoffed, crossing her arms. Maybe if you worked harder, we wouldn't be in this mess. Liam snapped, slamming his fist on the table. I'm working myself to the bone. And for what? To fund your ridiculous spending? Their shouting match escalated, echoing through the house. It was the first of many arguments, each one more bitter than the last. The love they had once shared seemed like a distant memory, replaced by resentment and blame. Desperation drove Liam to make a terrible decision. Believing it was the only way to keep their house, he began embezzling money from his company. At first, it seemed like a solution until he was caught. When his employer confronted him, Liam couldn't deny it. He was fired on the spot, and word of his actions spread quickly. Sophia's reaction was as cold as it was predictable. "You're useless," she spat when he told her what had happened. "You've ruined everything." Her contempt reached its peak when she served Liam with divorce papers, claiming she could no longer stay married to a man who couldn't provide for her. "I deserve better," she said flatly. But the divorce proceedings unearthed an even darker truth. During the legal battle, it was revealed that their son, the child Emily had cared for so lovingly, was not Liam's. A DNA test confirmed that Sophia had been unfaithful during their marriage, and the boy's biological father was one of her former coworkers. The revelation shattered Liam. He had lost his job, his home, and now the family he thought was his own. The legal battle grew uglier, with Sophia demanding custody of the child and Liam refusing to agree. Their arguments became public spectacles, drawing the attention of neighbors and friends who once envied their seemingly perfect life. Emily, hearing about the chaos through mutual acquaintances, felt a strange mixture of sadness and vindication. She had loved Liam deeply, despite his betrayal, and it hurt to see him suffer. But she also knew this was the inevitable result of their choices. One afternoon, she received a call from a friend who shared the latest gossip. "They're completely ruined," the friend said. "Liam is drowning in debt, and Sophia's spending hasn't slowed down. It's a disaster." Emily listened quietly, her thoughts swirling. She didn't rejoice in their downfall, but she couldn't deny the sense of closure it brought. For years, she had borne the weight of their entitlement and abuse. Now, they were finally facing the consequences of their actions. As the sun set that evening, Emily stood in her garden, breathing in the crisp air. For the first time in years, her life felt peaceful. She had learned to let go of the guilt and obligation that had tied her to Liam and Sophia. Their fall was tragic, but it was no longer her burden to bear. Chapter 8: Peace Restored. As the chaos of Liam and Sophia's lives spiraled further into disarray, Emily's life slowly began to regain its balance. With their toxic presence no longer looming over her, she found herself rediscovering the joy of simple, peaceful days in her home. For the first time in years, her house felt like her sanctuary again, a place of comfort and reflection rather than tension and conflict. The mornings were quiet and unhurried. Emily would wake to the sound of birds outside her window, the soft sunlight filtering through the curtains. She began each day with a cup of coffee on the porch, gazing out at the garden she and James had tended together. The roses were blooming, their vibrant colors a reminder of the beauty that still existed in her life. With her newfound peace, Emily also threw herself back into her work. As a manager at her late husband's family business, she had always taken pride in her role. Now, without the weight of Liam and Sophia's demands, she could dedicate herself fully to her team. Her focus and leadership brought about remarkable changes. The company's sales began to rise, and her employees thrived under her guidance. One day, during a staff meeting, her colleague Sarah pulled her aside. "Emily, you're amazing," she said with genuine admiration. "The way you've handled everything, it's inspiring. You've really turned things around for all of us." Emily smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. For years, she had poured her energy into people who didn't appreciate her. Now, she was surrounded by individuals who did. But it wasn't just her professional life that flourished. Emily also began to nurture her personal passions. She rediscovered her love for painting, setting up a small studio in the spare bedroom. Hours would slip away as she lost herself in the swirl of colors on her canvas, each stroke bringing her a sense of calm and accomplishment. She also reconnected with old friends, hosting quiet dinners and joining a local book club. These moments of companionship reminded her of the warmth and support she had been missing during her years of sacrificing for Liam and Sophia. As for Liam and Sophia, their lives continued to unravel. The last Emily heard, their divorce battle had grown even uglier. Sophia, burdened by her own debts and scandals, had alienated many of her former friends. Liam, still grappling with unemployment and legal troubles, had become a shadow of the boy Emily once knew. Though she felt pity for him, she resisted the urge to step in. He needed to face the consequences of his actions, just as she had learned to reclaim her own strength. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Emily sat by the fireplace with a glass of wine. In her lap was a photo album she hadn't opened in years. Flipping through the pages, she lingered on the images of her and James, smiling at their wedding, laughing at family barbecues, and posing in front of the house they had made into a home. Tears welled in her eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of gratitude for the love she had shared with James, for the strength she had found within herself, and for the peace she had finally reclaimed. As she placed the album back on the shelf, Emily glanced at James's portrait on the mantel. "I think you'd be proud of me," she whispered, her voice steady. In that moment, she realized she was no longer weighed down by the past. She had found her way through grief and betrayal, emerging stronger and more resilient. Her home was hers again, filled with memories of love and a future of hope. Emily smiled to herself as she turned off the lights and headed to bed. For the first time in a long time, she felt whole. Peace had been hard won, but it was hers to keep, and that, she knew, was worth everything.